Hello everyone, thank you for tuning into my first video. Today I'm going to be talking about boohoo, the UK-based fast fashion retailer. Obviously, it's a company, with a great balance sheet, with great history of growth, a really fast-growing company, a company that, compared to a lot of UK peers, is, really dominant, really good if you're looking for growth stocks. Now, it's had some bad news in the past few months. That news was rehashed again on Friday, causing a 15% decline in the price. It eventually closed about 10% down. That, for some, has been a trigger for value. The price declined 10%. I should buy, I should jump in here. I think that's also a bit of, fear of missing out from a few weeks ago when the stock declined about 50%, and then has not recovered all of it, but recovered a substantial amount in the meantime. So this is a point where people could jump in if they wanted to. But for me, that's a risk. It's not something I'm going to do. It's not something I would suggest people do, just because it's got a lot of uncertainty ahead of it as a company. Obviously, this is all about, The Guardian posting a story about ongoing allegations of below minimum wage pay at Leicester factories that boohoo uses to produce clothes. Now, to be clear, they don't own those factories. They don't run them. They just have agreements with them. Some people say that means that they shouldn't bear any responsibility for how the factories have operated for that minimum wage issue. You could argue against that equally. Boohoo is a fast fashion retailer. They need low costs to produce a profit. But they also have a certain responsibility to ensure that everyone they buy from, everyone that they partner with, is acting ethically and acting legally. To give boohoo a great price, corners may have been cut. At least that's what these stories, this evidence is alleging. Obviously, that's not necessarily proven yet, but it's not great when, the company has to take a reactive stance on these things. They could have been out in front of it. They could have found these issues themselves and distanced themselves from it. Instead, they've been attached to it by a angry, press and angry public, whether or not they deserve it. For me, that's a huge concern. Boohoo have said that they're going to sever relationships with these factories and have already done so with some. But we just don't know the extent. The Guardian found a few. There could be a lot more, there could be a lot less. We just don't know. On top of that, you've got to consider that they've got to look for new manufacturers. And by looking for new manufacturers, they've got to be thorough. They've got to ensure that they're going somewhere that has a history of ethical practices, that pays a fair wage, maybe even above the minimum wage in this case, because they have to repair that reputational damage. And they've got to do this while being under the microscope by the press, by watchdogs, by lobbyists, by industry groups. They're all going to be looking, waiting for them to screw up. You've also got government concerns. Priti Patel commented that she was concerned about how boohoo have reacted to the situation, because instead of trying to fix these factories, trying to fix how they operate, they've severed their relationships, leaving these employees worse off. Instead of getting minimum wage, they will in some cases be getting no wage now, because there's no work. Now, you might say that's not boohoo's responsibility, that's not boohoo's job, but if the government believes that it is, that is a risk. And they will once again be under the microscope because of it. Now look, this could have had no impact on boohoo's revenues this quarter. Equally, it could have had a huge impact. We just don't know. That's why I'm concerned about investing now in the company, even if it looks like a value play now. As they've had no production in certain factories, as they severed those relationships, inventories could be down. They could have had less stock to sell. That means less revenue. Now, that could be a small hit. That could be a big hit. We don't know. Equally, you've got to think about consumer trends, consumer practices. Boohoo aims for a market, a target market of under 35s. And the younger you go there, the more that the age group is known for its ethical buying habits, its preference for purchasing not only the cheapest product or the best product, but also that is created most ethically. In this case, that's not a good look for Boohoo. You know, if they want those ethical customers, those customers who care about those kind of things, then these kind of news stories are really bad. Now, you could say that Boohoo isn't going to get those customers anyway because it's a fast fashion brand. That's not where you would go if you were an ethical customer. But there will be a crossover there. You know, there's a difference between fast fashion, which does have negatives, to, you know, breaking the law and paying below minimum wage. Obviously, Boohoo didn't do that. They just were associated with that. But that is a problem. Those changing trends are why I think it's wrong to look at ASOS 5 years ago, who had similar allegations against its suppliers, and they recovered well from it. The stock price recovered. The company's obviously doing really well. That's not fair because trends have changed. The market now, especially in that age range, does care about ethical considerations, and they do vote with their wallet in that way. That's why it's a risk. And as I said, Boohoo is a fast fashion retailer. That's a concern for me. As an investor, I'm looking for companies that I can buy and hold for as long as I think they're going to increase their revenue, their profitability, their outlook. Because as they go up, the price should go up. You know, I'm a fan of Warren Buffett's holding period of forever. But I don't think that's something you can do with Boohoo, even at a low price, because it's a fast fashion brand. And there's increasing uproar against how that industry works, about the impact it's having on the climate, the pollution it spits out. At some point, those things are going to come to the fore in an even bigger way, and the industry will have to change. Now, Boohoo may be able to pivot and survive, and this might not happen for decades, but it is a risk. If you're buying now and you want to hold on to it for 5 years, you don't know what the legislation is going to be like. You don't know what might change to prevent fast fashion, to increase costs. Or the government might look at putting some demand on the companies to ensure their manufacturers are ethical. That would be an increased cost too. There's just so much uncertainty around this that it's difficult to predict. Until we get those hard numbers from Boohoo when they report at the end of September, we just don't know the effect that it's had. Now, the effect could be minimal, and that would be good. That might be a buy signal for some. You might not have that value play now, but that might be a buy signal because obviously their customers have gone, you know what, I'm not that bothered about this. I don't think it's Boohoo's fault. I'm just going to keep purchasing and move on. They might have performed well because it's an online retailer, and due to the current situation, that's all entirely possible. Equally, they could have been really hard hit by this reputational damage. And we have no idea how that's going to impact them going forward. As I said, they're a great growth company. They've had historically great growth compared to the FTSE, compared to other stocks, but that might change. If people are upset about how they operated, people don't want to buy through Boohoo anymore, that revenue growth could disappear overnight. We won't know that until September, and even beyond that, until next year's results. You might find that there's no hit now, but in a year's time, those revenue increases that people have bought into the stock because of have disappeared because people just aren't buying from Boohoo as much. Or, you know, they've reached that point where they've got customers who aren't necessarily as concerned, but to grow further, they need to have a wider customer base who is more concerned with ethical issues. That's why it's such a risk. For me, if you're investing before you see any numbers, you're more gambling than investing, even if it's a short-term position. Because you really don't know how they've performed, how they're going to perform. And you're just hoping that this hasn't hit them as hard as it looks like it might have, or it could have. And that is gambling for me. Anyway, these are all just my opinions, not financial advice, so form your own opinions. And thank you for listening to my thoughts on Boohoo. I, for now, am not a buyer, but if you are, good luck to you. And thank you for listening.